Welcome to Babyloss Talk. I am your host, Janelle Adams, a fellow baby loss mom who created the show to help remove the stigma, shame, and loneliness of losing a pregnancy or infant by sharing real stories, advice, and resources. I would like to take just a moment to thank Danielle so much for being on Baby Lost Talk. Thank you so much for being here. You're my very first guest, as I
Yay.
was just telling you. So thank you so much for being here. Thank you for trusting me to provide a positive space to share your story. I know that it's not an easy thing to talk about out loud, so I really appreciate you.
No problem. Thank you for hosting the show, and thank you for giving women like us a format to be able to share our stories. Thank you. You rock.
Thank you. Absolutely. So before we jump into your story, can you tell us a little bit about who Danielle is as a woman? You know, what are your hobbies? What do you do? We want to get to know you a little bit.
Sure. So my name is Danielle. I live in the Midwest, and I love life. I love everything that life has to offer. I've been married now for almost 6 years. It'll be 6 years in May. And my husband and I had a little boy a few years, or I'm sorry, we had a little boy in 2015, and unfortunately he passed away. But in the midst of all of that happening, we've had a lot of other challenges that have hit us, and so we've just really been able to maintain and to push through those challenges, which I know we're going to talk about that here today. But I love having fun with my friends and with my family. I'm really, really close to my family. And I love, yesterday, my husband and I, we volunteered at a charity fashion show. So I love giving back my time. I'm involved in a lot of different activities at church in terms of outreach. And I just love life. I love to laugh. It's my favorite thing to do. That's me in a nutshell. Yeah.
Awesome. And if you guys are watching this on our YouTube channel, I'm sure you can see Danielle's beautiful smile. Like, I can tell how much you love life. It's like it's radiating through my screen.
Thank you. Thank you.
Okay, so I do want to jump into talking about your little boy and whatever you feel comfortable sharing, as much as you feel comfortable sharing. I'd just like to know more about your story.
Okay, sure. So, what happened with our story is my husband and I found out. Well, I'll go back a little bit and just kind of set up what happened leading up to us getting pregnant, because that was crazy within itself. So, my husband and I got married in May of 2011, and then in February of 2012, my husband decided to leave his job and go work at another company because he wanted to grow more in his skills. He wanted to learn more. He wanted the opportunity to make more money. And I, as his supportive wife, we prayed about it, and we were like, sure, I was really excited for him. And so he decided to make that move. Well, 6 months after that, he lost his job.
Oh,
And then,
man.
and then for 18 and a half months after that, he did not have a job. So here we are, newlyweds, and we are just really going through what was the first of many just trials for us. So he's not working, and then in 2013, doctors found what are called fibroadenomas in one of my breasts, and they're benign fibroid tumors. Thankfully, they're benign, and so we continue to power through. About a week after the doctors found the first set of fibroadenomas, my husband was diagnosed with MS. So he's not working. I, have just been diagnosed with these benign tumors in my breast, and now my husband is diagnosed with MS. Okay.
Wow.
So then we continue to go through, and the following year in February, which was February of 2014, my husband starts working at another job. And then in June of 14, my grandfather passes away unexpectedly. And then a few months after that, I say for fun, the dog decides to die. So
Oh my gosh.
dog dies, all of this stuff going on. And it's like, really? Like, really? So then my husband's employer at the time, they started noticing that he had started moving a little slower than what they expected infected, and there were some other issues there with some other things that were happening at his job. And so he said, you know what, I think I'm going to like bow out gracefully. I don't understand why I'm kind of slowing down, because at this point in time we hadn't started to see really the effects of MS. And so we didn't really know what was going on. But he said, you know what, I found somewhere else to go and work, and it's a job where it'll be temporary, but then they'll move it, and so that it'll be full time. And so we both said, okay, this should work out better for us. So he decides to leave his job again. And right around that time, he was involved in a rollover accident on the highway where the SUV literally, it rolled over on its hood.
Oh my gosh.
He miraculously survived, and he's so silly and he's so funny. And so his first words to me were, one, I thought I was going to get his insurance money that day, and ha ha ha, he lived.
I love that he has such a good sense of humor about it.
Oh my God, I was ready to choke him. And the second thing was, he told me, well, when the SUV was rolling over, I was looking for the angels to come in to get me, but they never showed up. I'm like, are you serious? What's wrong with you? So we have just a whirlwind of all of this stuff happening. And in the midst of all of that going on, doctors found more fibroadenomas on my other breast. And what ended up happening with that was they also ended up finding what they called was an intraductal papilloma, which was a lesion that they said put me at higher risk for developing breast cancer. And my mother was a breast cancer survivor. And so when they gave me my options for this particular lesion was to either have it surgically removed, or I could sit back and watch it. And at that time I was 31, and I was saying, okay, I am young, I am healthy. This is not a watch party. Take it out. Just remove it. Take it out. So the doctors I consulted with my doctors, and they went on ahead, and I decided to go through surgery to have it removed. So I have this thing removed. All of this other stuff is happening in the background. And in the midst of me having this lesion removed, I was saying, okay, why are these things popping up in my breast? I'm healthy. I eat relatively healthy, other than my ice cream, which is my favorite food. Don't take my ice cream.
We all have to have a guilty pleasure.
Gotta have something.
Yeah.
Okay. And so I ended up trying to figure out, trying to connect the dots. And I said, well, the only thing I can come up with is maybe it's because I'm taking birth control. Because, birth control releases additional estrogen into your body. Right. And so I wonder if maybe that's what's causing it. I'll go on ahead, I'll get off of birth control. So I decided to stop taking the birth control. And what ended up happening was right around the time when I said I was going to get off of birth control, that's when the car accident happened. And so I called my doctor, and the dates are going to be so important when you hear this story. So I called the doctor, and I said, put me back on birth control. My husband was in this horrific car accident. This is too stressful of an event. We cannot, in good conscience, bring a child into the world right now. That was a Monday, okay? The car accident had happened on this particular Monday. The doctor said, okay. So I took 2 birth control pills that Monday. I took a pill that Tuesday. And on that Wednesday, I had an epiphany. And my epiphany was, you know what? There's never a perfect time to bring the child into the world. God is in control. It's going to be okay. So I said, okay, I'm not taking any more birth control. I had gotten pregnant that previous Sunday.
That was your plan, okay?
My plan was completely out of the window. So by the time that Monday when I called the doctor and I said, put me back on birth control, I was already pregnant. Like, it was completely over with. So it was like my husband looked at me and I got knocked up. That's pretty much like what happened.
Yeah.
So we get pregnant, and we're excited. We're like, okay, this is going to be our first child. And that following year in April, we went to go find out what we were having. This was just our gender scan. We were just trying to find out if we were having a boy or a girl. And we get to the doctor, we get to the sonographer's office, and she's rubbing the wand over my stomach, and she says, she doesn't say too much, and my husband and I, Chris and I, we're, watching the sonogram images, and we're going, oh my God, he has a big head. He gets that from your side of the family.
Yeah.
Oh my God, he has a stomach. told us we were having a little boy. He has a big stomach. He's definitely a little boy. And, and so we start laughing and joking and everything. And the sonographer's silent. And we didn't think anything of it. This is our first child. We don't know what we're doing. We're silly and we have fun, laugh all the time. So the sonographer leaves out of the room and she comes back. She says, well, I have to bring the doctor back in. And when the doctor came back in, her face was as white as snow. I mean, literally, she was devoid of color.
Wow.
And she told us, she said, your son has multiple abnormalities. And as soon as she got it out, I looked back at her and I said, you're kidding, right? And she said, no. She said, he has multiple abnormalities. So then my husband leans over and my husband says, well, what types of abnormalities are you talking about? And our son literally had things going on with him from the crown of his head to the soles of his feet. Wow. And she starts taking us through, and the sonographer was not legally allowed to tell us what she saw.
Right, yeah.
The doctor. And so she starts taking us through all of the things that she sees. And so she sees that he has his ventricles in his brain are enlarged, and it looks like his eyes are deep set, and it looks like his ears are low, and it looks like he has part of his bowel growing into his umbilical cord. And they said that his wrists were clubbed, and they said that his feet were clubbed. And so we're just trying to figure out where all of this came from, because we're high on life. Like, we don't need anything to help us. We don't we don't smoke, we don't do recreational drugs, we don't do anything that would be conducive to us having a child being born with the types of issues that our child was being diagnosed as having. So she says, well, I want to refer you to some specialists. And so that became the journey of us having a high-risk pregnancy. So we have a high-risk pregnancy, and they had given us the option of terminating our son just because of all of the issues they saw. And we said, absolutely not. That just was not an option for us. So we decided to carry him to term. And the entire time that we're carrying him, they're telling us, this doesn't look good. There were some concerns about if he was going to be able to breathe when he was born. And they had painted a very grim picture. And so my husband and I, being the people that we are, we did our best to just remain positive, to maintain our faith. We didn't share what was going on with our son with a lot of people because we didn't want others to be worried about us.
Right.
And this was our first child. So we wanted to be excited. We still wanted to experience the joys of being pregnant. So we end up getting to July, and we knew that they were going to take our son about 3 weeks early. So we get to July, and he had kind of stopped moving around as much as he used to. The baby had stopped moving around as much as he used to, and that kind of sparked some concerns in me. So we had gone into the doctor one day, and the doctor said, well, if anything changes, I want you to come back in the next day just so that we can observe you. And some changes occurred. And so I go into the hospital at 12:30 on Tuesday, July 21st. And by 4:41 that afternoon, we had our baby. And he comes out and he's not breathing. And he is as blue as your jean jacket that I see. That's pretty good of what he looked like when he was born. And we're just trying to figure out what's going on. Oh my God, what's happening? And so the baby ends up getting rushed over to the children's hospital in town. I'm at one hospital, and then my husband is running back and forth between the two hospitals to check on his son and to check on his wife. And so a few days passed, and on the third day, our son ended up having to be, he had to have a breathing tube forced down his throat. He ended up having to be resuscitated because he wasn't breathing at the time of birth. They said that it was a traumatic birth for him. For me, I ended up having a bikini cut C-section and a classical cut C-section from top to bottom. So my was cut from top to bottom and across. And it was a very, very trying time. And so on the third day of his life, they came and they told us that things were looking really, really bad. They wanted us to send him through another MRI to try to see if we could figure out what else was going on with him. And so at a week of age, our son went through an MRI. And they ended up finding out that in addition to all of the other issues that he had going on, he also had fluid around his brain. He didn't have any of his glands. and his brainstem was abnormally underdeveloped. And your brainstem allows you to do everything. You cannot live a normal, healthy life without a brainstem. And so when they told us that, they also told us that we had some very hard decisions to make. And our decisions were to either leave him at the hospital. He could have gone through additional numerous surgeries, and they told us that none of those surgeries would help him. Mm-hmm. We could have brought him home, and bringing him home meant that we would have had to keep him connected to all of the machines and the equipment to keep him alive. And they made it very clear to us that he could still pass away, even being connected to those machines. The third option was we could turn off all of the ventilators, turn off the machines, and our minds let him go live with Jesus. And that was the decision that we made. Because for us in heaven, there are no needle pricks, there are no x-rays, there are no MRIs, there are no blood transfusions, which are all things that our 10-day-old son had to endure. Mm-hmm. And one of the things that really helped us make that decision was I had a good friend who worked at the hospital who was a doctor who saw complex medical patients. And when I had her come to this meeting with us with our son's doctors, and she said, as your friend and as a doctor, everything that they're saying is absolutely correct and it's not going to get better. Mm-hmm. And in addition to that, I said, well, you see patients who are like 20 with the mental capacity of a 6-month-old. And she said, yes, I do. And she said, and it's a very hard life on them, and it's a very hard life on their parents. And I had to be honest, and I had to be real with myself about what type of life would our son have and what type of life would we have had we chose to bring him home.
And how long did you guys, between having these options laid out in front of you and making the decision, how long was that?
It was probably within the hour. We made our decision very quickly because the doctors, going even back, so when I had the fibroid adenomas in my breast in 2013 and in 2014, and I'm laying there on the biopsy table, I had to have biopsies for both of them. Mm-hmm. And if anyone has ever had to have a biopsy, it sucks. I think the anesthesia probably hurts more than the actual needle prick itself, but biopsies are not fun. And I remember laying on the biopsy table asking the doctors that were pricking me to extract parts of these fibroid adenomas, if I get pregnant, like what would that mean for me? Because they were telling me I was going to have to go through additional MRIs, and I knew that I couldn't have an MRI while I was pregnant because the contrast that they put through you in an MRI can spontaneously abort a fetus. Mm-hmm. And so the doctor said, don't get pregnant. And I said, well, what happens if I do? And she said, well, don't. And I said, well, what happens if I if I do, what's going to happen? And so when I got pregnant and I called the doctors back, they said, well, that'll be okay. We'll just push your MRI back, your follow-up MRI after I had surgery. And I said, okay. So I felt like along our journey, one doctor had already said, don't get pregnant. And here we popped up pregnant. Then here our little boy is, and he's not doing well. And the doctors are saying, this is not looking good. And, or before he was born, they're saying this is not looking good. And we're fighting the doctors and we're saying, no, we want our child to have a fighting chance. And then after he's born, they're still saying, this isn't looking good. And we're still fighting them. And finally, I think what happened was, it wasn't that we didn't have any more fight left in us. I think that it was a change in perspective for us to realize that just because our child was passing away did not mean that he wasn't going to still have purpose. And it didn't mean that he still wasn't going to be able to live. It would just look differently than what we thought it was going to look like. And so saying goodbye to him was saying hello to a completely different realm of our purpose that we never thought that we would step into. And so when they gave us those options, it didn't take us long because we didn't want him to suffer. That was my husband's biggest concern. He kept on saying, I do not want my boy to suffer. And for us, it sounded like the picture that they were painting was going to be one of suffering. And we didn't want that for him.
Being in the hospital and just seeing him hooked up to all the machines and everything, that alone, thinking about that being the rest of his life as a parent, I'm sure that just, broke your heart. I know my daughter didn't live that long, but when I did get to visit her in the NICU and just seeing her little body hooked up to all these machines, it broke me.
Yeah.
You know, and I mean, at that point, I didn't know if she was going to live or pass on, but
Yeah.
it's just seeing it is very hard for a parent. Very, very hard.
Absolutely. And so, like I said, my husband and I we're a lot of fun and we're pretty silly. And so we would go in there into the NICU and we'd see him they had him under one of those lights. I don't know if you're familiar with those lights, but we would call it, he looked like a little rotisserie. He looked like a little plump chicken underneath the little rotisserie thing. And then he had all of the little, you know, things that were hooked up to him. And then one day he was jaundiced, and so they had to put the little goggles over his eyes. And I said, this is like your first little costume. And we were trying to do our best to make the best out of a really, really sad situation, but taking all of those things into account and really being honest with ourselves about what our lives were going to look like and what his life would look like. Even taking it from the standpoint of, I know that your children only know what you tell them. And so every day of our child's life, he was loved. He was told that he was healthy. He was told that he had parents who loved him and family and friends who loved him. But even still, we knew that us saying goodbye to him would be okay. And it was a decision that definitely hurt us. It hurt immensely and it hurt deeply, but there have been a lot of really great things that have come out of our experience. And so that's where that's where some of that different perspective comes in.
Yeah, I think it's definitely a unique perspective. I mean, unless you've been through this, like we have, you really don't think about things this way. They did tell you while he was in utero that things were, not looking so great. How did you mentally stay strong during that time? Because for a lot of women, that alone would have broken them down. I mean, were you worried every single day, or, what were you doing every day to keep that mental toughness? Because someone may be listening who's going through that right now. They may have a diagnosis that doesn't seem so great. What did you do every day?
Yeah. So from the first day that they told us, okay, your son has all of these different issues, I remember I excused myself from the room because the doctor said, well, I would recommend that you get an amniocentesis so that we can try to figure out what's going on. And so she said, I'm going to leave the room. I'm going to let you and your husband talk about it. I'll be back if you decide to do this today. And I said, okay. And so he and I talked about it. She came back in the room. And when she came back, I remember excusing myself and I went to the bathroom. I will never forget this. I went to the bathroom that was right outside of the sonographer's room, and I closed the door and got down on my hands and my knees. And I prayed like I had never prayed before. And I think for me, it was one of those things where I have a relationship with Jesus. I have a relationship with God. And I'm sitting there thinking to myself, I know that we are not going through this because, or not because of, but it was one of those things where it was like the God that I know wouldn't put us through this. So why are we going through this? This cannot be the God that we serve. Like, this is crazy. And I'm crying my heart out. And so every day from that point on, we both, my husband and I both, we just decided to maintain our stance of faith. We decided to maintain our positive affirmations. And it was one of those things. There's a Bible verse that I've recently come across, is Daniel 3:18. And what it says is even if he doesn't, he's still God. He's still able. And so that was the standpoint that we took. Even if this doesn't turn out okay, my standpoint was, even if it doesn't turn out okay, it's still going to be okay. My husband's standpoint was, it better turn out okay. He didn't waver at all. And so going through, I mean, we were just happy to be pregnant. So it was like, okay, let's see here. This baby's only going to know what his parents tell him, right? So we weren't going to tell him that he had all of these issues. We saw him every week on the sonogram bouncing around inside of my belly. We chose to talk to him about other things. Like, I would be driving and I'm talking to my belly and I'm like, okay, little boy, now it's time to do our ABCs and let's learn our numbers and let's learn how to spell your name. I think it was some of that blind faith that just kicked in, and other people might call it being naive, but we knew that our diagnosis was not going to rob us of the joy of having a happy pregnancy. And so that would probably be my best advice to someone who might be going through something along the lines of what we went through with a horrible medical diagnosis. No one has a right to take away your joy from being pregnant. You still enjoy every single day, no matter how long that pregnancy is going to last. You still have the right to be a pregnant, happy woman. And even though in the back of our minds, of course, we had to consider the things that the doctors were saying, but we did not allow those things to alter our walk. Right when we had the baby, though, because of my husband's strong stance, I think that both of our worlds were rocked, but I think he was in shock by it all because he really was expecting it to be different. And when it wasn't, I think that's where his breakdown came. But I will always remember him coming home, and every time that the doctors would say, okay, his heartbeat isn't regulated or his blood pressure is too low, my husband would come home and he would make a healing CD. And in our son's room, right above his isolette bed, we brought in a little like radio CD player. And my husband would record his voice and he would play this CD, and that CD he played every single day, 24 hours a day in our son's hospital room, where you could hear my husband's voice saying, you are healed. You are loved by your parents. You are a child of God. Every single person that walked into his room, that was the first thing that they heard was my husband's voice declaring that our son would be fine. And even to the point when we walked out of the hospital, the day that he passed away, a doctor walked us down to our car and she said, your son was loved every day of his life. And not everyone can say that. And yeah, I think when it happened, when he passed away, I think no one was expecting it because we chose not to share our story with a whole lot of people. We didn't know how it was going to turn out. So why make people worried?
And I'm sure after everything happened, you experienced this where people are trying to comfort you, but their words are more hurtful than anything else. And it's just like, I just would have rather you said nothing. Definitely one of the things that I want to accomplish with this podcast for maybe someone who fortunately hasn't gone through this, but they're trying to help a loved one.
Yeah.
Share maybe something that someone said trying to help you that actually made you feel worse, because I really think it's so important to educate people on what not to say, because they do love you so much and they want to be there and they want to help you, but then it's like they say something and they have no idea how much it's like setting you back in your grief.
As I mentioned before, there are a lot of things that we did after our son passed away to help other families. And so the thing that I'm most proud of is we started an organization called the Angel Baby Network. And Angel Baby is an organization, it's based out of Ohio, but we meet the needs. We meet the immediate needs of people in Ohio, Kentucky, and Indiana. And then we've actually launched a national program for families to connect with each other across the country who've also lost children. And so I can mention some additional information about that later, but on our website, we have a blog. And one of the blogs that I wrote a few months ago was called 21 Ways to Help Families Who've Endured Loss. And so some of the ways that I talk about being able to help families as they walk through loss are just being there for them, just being quiet and listening to them, give them hugs, offer to make them dinner, offer to take them out to do things that they like doing, offer to still invite them out to go to places. Families like ours don't want to be shunned because of our experience. We need to know that we're still included. And then let us make the decision if we want to go to whatever the event or the activity is. So for example, for me, our baby shower was in June of 2015. And I've not been to anyone's baby shower since then because I know I can't handle it. But I've been invited to baby showers. And then I've made the decision not to go. And those people have respected those decisions. some of the things that I think people say are things like, oh, well, you're so young, you can still have another baby. Oh, what's another good one? Unfortunately, one of my loved ones, and I had to have a heart-to-heart conversation with her, and she understood where I was coming from. One of our loved ones, after our son passed away, I was having just a really rough day, and I'm crying, and it was just bad. And she said, "Oh, I think you're worried about too much. You can just get knocked up again." And
oh my gosh.
so sensitive, because she knew everything that we had gone through. And in addition to that, our story is so unique in that we ended up finding out that our son passed away as a result of a genetic defect that I'm a carrier for. And so what that means medically is that if we get pregnant again naturally, the statistic is that if we conceive and we have a little boy, there's a 50-50 chance that the same thing could happen again. If we get pregnant again and conceive naturally with a little girl, there's a 25% chance that she could be a carrier. So what the doctors have recommended is that we go through IVF with gene selection, and then that way they can they can investigate every single one of our embryos and only implant the ones that don't have this particular genetic defect. And so knowing that our story doesn't end with, oh, we can just try again, there's steps that we have to take. It's hurtful for someone to say, oh, just have another baby.
Yeah, because it's not that simple. It's not that simple at all. Even not even physical, just mentally too. It's not that easy to just like jump into into another pregnancy.
Right, just have another baby. And it's one of those things where even if you have another baby, one child does not replace the other child.
Amen, sister. Oh my gosh.
It's like, okay, so even when we do have our next child, I still know that I'm a mother of two, not a mother of one. And if we decide to have another child, I'm still a mother of three, not a mother of two. And so there's not a replacement kid that takes the place of the one that passed away.
Absolutely. You're so correct about that.
Yeah. So trying to even help people understand that, and trying to help people understand that I know you're really trying to be nice and sweet, but you're not helping the situation. One of the things that I always say is like I love you, or I'm praying for you, and a hug goes much further than, oh, have another baby, oh, you're young, oh, yeah. It doesn't work that way.
Yeah, I think the best thing to do is to just gift your loved one with your presence, just being there, and especially those first few days, weeks, months, there's so much emotions, and one day you're angry, one day you're sad, one day you're fine and everything's cool, and then the next day you want to like break everything. So I think just having someone to be there and to just listen, and maybe help you get some fresh air. One of the things that I think is super important is if you can have your loved one even unsubscribe from all the emails that you signed up for, like baby center and stuff like that. I'll never forget when I got an email and it was like, your baby is now.
Yes.
Danielle.
Yeah.
It messed up my entire day. It messed up oh my God. It set me. It was terrible.
Pack from because you sign up for all that stuff because you're super excited and you're like, oh my God, I'm gonna be a mom. And then after it happens, you start getting stuff in the mail. So I remember coming home, our son passed away on a Friday, and that Saturday his Social Security card came in the mail.
Oh my gosh, that happened to me too. My daughter's her social, and I think her insurance card came.
Then like a couple of months after that, I got something in the mail from like a diaper company, and then I got stuff in the mail from a major retail store, and they're like, hey, we're just thinking about you. And then there was one time I had gone to a citywide baby shower that was being hosted by a church, and just went and I was like, they were like, we're calling all moms. You should come to this baby shower. So I went to the baby shower. It was probably a month before our son was born. And then a couple of months after he was born, I got a call from them and they said, we just want to say thank you for coming to our baby shower that was held over the summer. And we're having a baby blessing. And the baby blessing is going to be, and we wanted to invite you and your family to celebrate. And that's when I had to tell the young lady on the phone, thank you so much for calling, but our son died. And there was just complete silence because I think I shocked her because our experience, people who've gone through what you and I've gone through, it's unnatural. It's unnatural. So we're trying to figure it out. Other people are trying to figure it out. And then everybody's just confused.
Yeah.
Okay?
Totally.
They don't know what to say and what to do. Mm-hmm. And so, unfortunately, when people say silly things, it puts that onus back on us. And we're grieving, and we're trying to figure it all out.
Yeah.
To then comfort other people. And, oh, no, it's okay. It's going to be all right. You don't have to be sad for me.
It's so funny you said that because you really do end up having to counsel other people when you're the one that's lost the baby.
Then they all jacked up and sad, and they like, oh, I'm so sorry. You're like, oh, don't be. This is well. And then they teary-eyed, and now you're teary-eyed, and everybody just
it's a hot mess.
And so it's all a hot mess. And you're trying to like help them and they supposed to try to help you and then everybody just sad.
Yeah.
So, I think that as parents who have lost children, it's just important for us also. Unfortunately, sometimes we have to be the bigger person and sometimes we have to extend that grace because sometimes you have older people or those people who just don't know. And they're trying their best, but they just miss the mark. And then you really do. You have to sometimes be the bigger person and say, actually, this isn't something that you should say to me. You should try saying something like this. So that would be my best advice. Just extend grace and patience to people. They don't know what to say. And I think that it's one of those things where you take it from the standpoint of, I feel so loved that I have so many people who care about me, who really want the best for me. I just have to kind of forgive them and excuse the fact that they don't know what to say. And so, it's difficult because it's like, would you prefer someone to reach out to you and say the wrong thing and then you help them figure out how to say the right thing? Or would you prefer that no one reach out to you and now you really feel all alone?
Yeah, it's tough. It's definitely very confusing because like you said, it's an unnatural like order. You know what I mean? It's like you expect someone older, to pass away. You don't really think about, your especially your first pregnancy and, and that was the experience for me too. You don't think about stuff like this happening. You're so excited it's your first pregnancy and, you're ready to become a mom. The last thing on your mind is that anything can go wrong. You guys make this courageous decision and you leave the hospital and now you're home. What did grieving look like for you?
So, when we found out that, our options were grim and this was just not looking good for us, my husband and I immediately went into action mode. So we said that we wanted our son's life to have a huge purpose. We knew that we wanted his life to mean something. We knew that his life was not going to just end in the hospital. So some of the very first things that we did on day number 9 of his life, which was the day that we made the decision to let him go on ahead and pass away, or to unhook the machines and just see what happens. Because that was really what our decision was. We were like, okay, either God is about to perform the greatest miracle known to man and let this baby breathe on his own, or he's going to end up calling our son home. So when we had to make that decision, we said, okay, so what are some other things that we can do to make sure that his life means like something? So we immediately got in touch with the organ donation network here in town because we knew that we wanted our son to be an organ donor. And unfortunately, because of the abnormalities that he was born with, he wasn't able to be a live organ donor, but we ended up donating all of his organs that we could donate to research. So we donated his brain, his lungs, his heart, And I think there were a couple of other organs that they were able to use for research studies. We also consented for him to be a part of different research studies so that they could start developing gene therapies to help any other children that were born with such defects that our son was born with. We also decided to set up a fund at the hospital where people could donate back in his honor, back to the NICU. Mm-hmm. And then we also decided to donate all of my breast milk. So our son never had a chance to get any of my breast milk. And so we decided to donate all of my breast milk. And I later found out that after 6 weeks of pumping, only 6 weeks of pumping, I was able to donate, or 8 weeks of pumping, I was able to donate enough breast milk for 3,000 feedings for babies across 3 different states and 7 different NICUs. Wow. So our grieving process may have looked a little bit differently than others because we had already done all of these things to know that, okay, our son's life was making such a difference. On the flip side of that, there were days when I would just I think the biggest thing for us was like, why? Because we didn't know yet that he had passed away from this genetic defect. So we're like, why did this happen? And there were days when I would just sit and I'd be quiet. But every single day I was at home. My husband by this time was working. I would go downstairs, or I would already be downstairs, and I would open up all of the shades in the house, and I was determined not to get depressed. I was determined to not sit and sulk in that feeling of, oh my God, my baby's life is over now. My life is over also. That wasn't going to happen. I would open up the blinds. It would be like, hello world. I know that this is horrible, but something greater is coming. There was one time that I remember the day before he passed away, the morning that he passed away, actually, we were getting ready to go to the hospital to going ahead and tell the doctors to unhook the machines. And I just laid out across his crib and just wailed. And it hurt. It hurt, but I continued to allow people to love on me. I may have not always been willing or ready to reach out to other people, but I allowed people to reach out to me. And so that would be something that I would suggest to parents who are walking through something like this. Don't shut off the door of communication for other people to reach out to you. Even if you don't respond back, allow them to still text you, allow them to still check on you, allow them to still come over, because you really do need that.
Absolutely.
So those were some of the things that we did. And then a couple of months after he passed away is where Angel Baby was developed, because on the day that we left the medical center, I felt all alone. So I knew that other moms had lost children, but I just felt all by myself. And so, what ended up happening was that year in October, which was 4 months after he passed away, I said, okay, well, I think I want to have an ornament party for families who've lost children. And so I mentioned the idea to one of my other girlfriends who'd also lost a child. And she said, okay, well, let's do it. And I was like, let's do it. It's kind of like when you have that idea that you're going to do something great and all you need is that extra push to do it. And so she gave me the extra push to do it. And so what ended up happening was I wanted to have an ornament party. And I started thinking about how families probably would need support above and beyond
during the holidays. Yes, the holidays are so tough.
They're tough, and I'm like, don't you hate it when people only donate to the homeless shelter at Christmas time? Folks don't need the help the other 11 months.
Right.
So I was like, well, okay, these families are going to need ongoing support. I know that my schedule was really, really crazy, so I knew that I couldn't dedicate to doing something once a month, but I could dedicate to doing something once every other month. And so I met with a bereavement counselor, and she said, well, what are you going to call this group that you're starting? And I said, I think I want to call it Angel Baby Network. And she said, I like that name. And I said, I do too. So she said, okay. So that's where Angel Baby was started from. And so now we meet once every other month. And it's almost, I call it a support group on steroids, because it's not just your everyday support group. It's really a community of people who are joining together to help support one another. And then we also connect families back to other resources in the community, like medical doctors and psychologists, to help them along their journey of grief. And then we've launched our national campaign, as I was just mentioning to you, where we have a program for families to be peer-to-peer matched with other families who are just like theirs from all over the country. So if you've lost twins, we'll have families that you can connect with who've also lost twins. If you are a divorced single parent, we have families of divorced single parents who, you know, are families with divorced single parents who can connect. Or even as deep as, like, my husband and I are Christians, but child loss does not necessarily, it doesn't pick like what color you are, what race you are, what
sure doesn't.
What socioeconomic status you are. So we even have atheists who come to our meetings, and they need to be loved too. So I'm hoping with our national program, we can create this database of families from all over so that we know that we're not alone. So if any of the listeners want information about our Connecting Hands and Hearts program, they can check us out on at www.angelbabynetwork.org and learn more about that.
Absolutely. And I'll be sure to include your links in the show notes. That way everyone can easily access your network. I think this is so amazing because, like you said, one of the biggest parts of the grieving process is feeling so alone, you know, and even before we actually started the official interview, like I was talking about, it's kind of like being in this secret club, and you don't know anyone is in this club until, you know, you go through this and then you start opening up, and then maybe like an aunt might say, you know what, 20 years ago, or, you know, whatever, I had a baby and I didn't, you know, it's just such a hush thing. And you feel so alone, but there are so many people who are going through this. And if you can connect with someone who understands, it makes a world of difference. That helped me even more than therapy, was just talking to other women who had been through this and just realizing that I wasn't like just, you know, I don't want to use the word freak, but that's how I felt at the time. I felt like something was so wrong with me because everybody else, you know how it feels. Everybody else has a baby except me.
No, like you're not an anomaly.
Exactly.
People don't talk about it, and I think people don't talk about it, one, because it probably hurts so much. Chris and I both, our parents had both lost children. And we only heard about those children. I mean, we're in our like early to mid 30s now. We'd only heard about those children like a couple of times, like our entire lives. And it's either because it hurts so much, or, you know, people who are our parents' age, a couple of generations before us,
they didn't talk about it.
They didn't talk about it. They didn't have a baby loss talk. They didn't have an Angel Baby Network. They didn't have a Janelle or a Danielle to say, hey, it's going to be okay. I'll hold your hand as you walk through this. And so now you have these young women like you and myself who are like, wait a minute, I need to talk to somebody.
Yeah.
I lose my mind. So I need to talk to someone about this. And so, you know, like I said before, I'm so grateful for you and for your organization and for what you're doing. I think it's amazing. Yeah.
I just think it's so needed, you know, things like what we do, because I wish something like this existed, you know, when I was going through, and I mean, honestly, I'm still going through it, to keep it 100. You know, it's like my daughter would be 6 years old this upcoming July, and I've been fortunate enough to have you know, 2 living children since then, both high-risk pregnancies, which took mentally was very hard because, unfortunately, like I said, we know how it can, you know, how things can go. But just even the different types of loss, I was very ignorant to stillbirths and you know, even with you, just different things genetically that can play a part, because people don't talk about these things when you're getting pregnant unless it happens to you. And then with the next pregnancy, now they're taking all these extra steps to make sure that your next pregnancy is okay. And, you know, I wish people, or I don't know, just medically, I wish maybe there were just additional stuff. If you're pre-planning, and I think in both of our cases we weren't pre-planning, it just kind of happened. But just in it, just kind of letting women know, you know, if you are pre-planning or if you can help it, you know, here are some things that you can do before getting pregnant. Now with my last two children, now that they know that I'm high risk for preterm, now there's a injection I have to take every single week, you know, which if I had that injection day one with my daughter, maybe she, you know, I mean, there's a lot of maybes and, you know, you just never know, but it does kind of make you think like, you know, is there a way that medically as time progresses that we can figure out these things before they happen? You see, I think it's UCLA. They're currently working on like this device prevent preterm labor because our infant mortality rate is so high, even here in the US. It's insane. I mean, you know, 1 out of 4 women are losing their pregnancies, and people like me who are, you know, I call my uterus a stunt queen because I just don't know what she's ever going to do. So like, you know, people like me who it's a little harder to go full term, you know, for whatever reason, you know, maybe more testing or I don't know, something. Even as soon as you find out and you go on that first appointment, like, what can we do? You know.
I agree with you 100%. I've gotten involved with a number of different organizations that help prevent preterm birth. And then even I'm a member of an organization that helps prevent preterm birth. It's called Cradle Cincinnati. And it combats not only preterm birth and infant mortality. And then I'm also a member of a board for a hospice program in town too. And so even just the more that I think people share their stories, the more that people say, hey, you're not alone, the more that people do research and that, you know, the doctors do research to find out why is this happening and how can we prevent it, the better that it's going to be. But you have to open your mouth. You have to say something in order for those types of things to continue to happen.
Right.
And so I think the more that we all feel empowered to open our mouths and say, hey, you're not alone. You will be okay. I know that this hurts. I know that it sucks. No, you didn't do anything to cause this. Is the better that will be. I call it, you were talking about the secret club. I call it the sorority and fraternity that no one wants to be a part of.
Absolutely.
Because it's one of those things where when you find out that someone else has lost a child, you immediately have this connection to them. And it's like, oh my God, you too? Well, what happened? You want to know their story. You want to hear about their child. And you want to help get them connected to the people who you know. So it's definitely a bittersweet, you know, type of experience, because I feel like we all really just want to help each other. We all want to help each other.
And it's funny you say that because I have a bunch of girlfriends now. I call them my sisters who all lost babies, and they've just come into just for me sharing my story online, they've all come into my life. And I'm like, these women are so amazing. I wish this wasn't the way, or this wasn't the thing that connected us. But now that I have them, you know, if I am having a down day, I can speak to them and they know exactly what I'm going through. I don't have to really explain it. My oldest son,
I definitely agree.
A lot of times, like, he hasn't really done it lately, but I've heard him in his sleep talking to his sister. You know, like, he's very aware that we talk, like, because she's a part of our lives every day. So he knows, he's 4 now. So he understands that he has a sister. He knows her name. Like, you know, we talk about her every day, just like we're having a regular conversation. Oh, Jolie this, Jolie that. You know what I mean? He's very aware of her. And even saying something like that to someone else might be a little weird, but to another baby loss mom like you, it's like, cool.
And I also want to mention that one of the other things that we did, you know, there's definitely beauty for ashes. with our story, one of the other things that we did, so after our son passed away and after we started Angel Baby, in April of last year, we were approached by a book publisher who said, hey, I've heard of your story and I wanted to know if you'd be willing to write a book about your experiences, and definitely about our experience with our son, but also the experience of, you know, us being this young married couple and having walked through everything with MS and the car accidents and the job losses and having money and not having money. And so we wrote a book about our experience. It was finished on November the 1st, and it actually comes out on April 25th of 2017. So the book is coming out in a little under 3 months, and we're super excited about that. It's titled As Sure as Tomorrow Comes, One Couple's Journey Through Loss and Love. And it's not a how-to book. I know that there's a lot of books out there that's like, okay, this is what you need to do when you're going through this situation. That's not our book. Our book is really just a story of love and being able to overcome some really difficult challenges. So I hope that everyone, you know, takes some time to go and take a look at the book. I can give you the link for that also.
Yeah, be sure to send me that. And then, you know, once, I don't know if we can pre-order or when it's released.
Order it.
Awesome. So you can send me the link and I'll, you know, shoot that out to everyone. But I do want to mention, because you bring up your husband a lot and he sounds like such an amazing person. Did you guys do any counseling together, or was it just getting in action in terms of fulfilling this higher purpose for your son? Like, you know, what can, I mean, as much as you can share, how was he feeling, or what was he doing? After, because you know we grieve differently.
Yeah, definitely. So Chris, goodness gracious, he's a nut. Okay, so he keeps us laughing. But when I was holding our son in my arms and he was passing away, Chris leaned down and whispered in my ear. He said, "This is not going to tear us apart." And I muttered those same words. I said, "I agree." And so his grieving process, I think, you know, there would be times when he would get really sad. There were some times when he would cry. And I hadn't really seen my husband cry before then. But I think he was more focused on making sure that we kept our son's memory alive. So we still talk about him. Like you said, you talk about Jolie every day. We talk about Junior all the time. And you know, I think for him, he was concerned about making sure that I was okay too. You know, he has his own challenges that he's dealing with when it comes to MS and when it comes to job loss. And, you know, I think he's just been very supportive. So it's taken him, it was so funny because I remember for the first Angel Baby Network meeting, I said, "Okay, babe, we have this meeting that we have to go to." And he's like, "Well, who's hosting it?" I was like, "We are." I'm like, "It's our organization." "Oh, it's our organization." "Well, what's the," you know, so he's just very honest, but he's very supportive. So he, you know, he definitely speaks out a lot for husbands. He reminds people that husbands are so important, that fathers are so important.
Yes, that's so true. Because people forget about the men in our lives. You know, this is their baby too.
Yeah, they are. And like when we were in the hospital, you know, I'm at another hospital. I'm on Percocet. Okay. I'm in the hospital recovering from this C-section. And my husband is the one who's spending the night at the hospital with our son. My husband is the one that's always there with the baby. And on the like contact board, you know how like they might have like a whiteboard or something along those lines in the hospital room. So on the whiteboard in the hospital room, they said like one of the lines was listed for parents. And they posted my contact information. Well, God only knows what I'm doing at my hospital. Like, you know, they're coming in to teach me how to like pump milk from my boobs, and they're trying to like make sure I had medicine in me and everything. And Chris was the one that was at the hospital. They should have had his contact information up. So even just being able to speak out for dads and let families know that dads are important, that's something that Chris is really, really, really big on.
Yeah, my husband as well.
Yeah, he wants to make sure that they know that dads are just as important as moms are. So that's where he comes in.
In the middle of the night, like you might be sleeping and you just might have a nightmare or, you know, something. And it really helps to have someone there with you as much as possible because when you think about it, they're the only other person on the planet that knows your loss exactly. You know what I mean?
Yep, I agree.
That's their baby
I
too,
agree
and they're there with you. Don't forget about the dad. I tell people that all the time, you know, don't forget about the dads. They're like, you know, these big macho guys. When it comes to a man and his child,
Yep,
you know,
there's nothing like it.
there's nothing like it.
Yeah, I agree 100%. So, kudos to your husband too for even just supporting you and wanting to do the same thing of letting people know how important dads are. Dads are so important. My life would be completely different if my father wasn't in my life. And so, even though our children may have passed away, I think as it's a responsibility as a mom and as a dad to still nurture and to still teach the world about your child and to still mother or to still father or to still parent that child's soul. That's what one of my other, you call them your sisters, that's what one of my other like Babyloss sisters told me. She said, it's still so important for us to be able to parent that child's soul. And so Chris and I both make sure that we parent our child's spirit, we parent our child's soul. And our son has made us so proud of the things that he has been able to accomplish through his mom and his dad. We feel pretty blessed to have had him and to have had the opportunity to be his mom and his dad.
Well, I just have to say, you are the epitome of strength. I mean, it hasn't been that long, and look at all the things that you've done, in his name and in his memory, and just fulfilling his purpose. You are so strong, and I mean, if ever you have a down day, just know that you are so blessed, despite what's happened. I mean, I don't I don't think I was that strong this early on after my loss. It was a very strange time, especially with Jolie being my first child. It's like a weird place, because I remember the first Mother's Day after my loss, and I went to church and it was Mother's Day and they were giving out roses. And, they were like, stand up, and they passed out roses. And I was sitting down. I'm like,
yep,
this is weird. Like, am I a mom? Am I not a mom? It's really weird. And I just remember, and now I'm about to start crying. But I remember one of the, a couple of the church sisters just looking at me and like giving me the head nod, like, stand up.
Yep.
Yep.
And
because I was fortunate enough to have a church family that really stood behind me, prayed for me, because I was in church like 4 or 5 days a week after this loss, because I didn't know what else to do, because otherwise if I sat at home by myself, my mind was just going crazy and, beating myself up and, lots of fear and all of that. And the only way I could quiet my mind was to be in church and to talk to God and just have all these people love on me and anoint my womb and let me cry. Did you seek any counsel? I know you spoke about a bereavement counselor a little bit. Did you do that? Church therapy? And what did you do?
So, Chris and I, we believe strongly in the power of marriage counseling, and especially with all the stuff that we've been through in the short amount of time that we've been married. So we've been in counseling for the last couple of years just to maintain a healthy marriage. So,
and that's so important. That is so important.
There's nothing wrong with going to counseling. All of us need it. All of us got issues.
I know. I'm like, listen, everybody needs therapy. Everybody. Right. We all have stuff that we're dealing with, or things that we don't even realize we're dealing with. Yeah. Everybody needs therapy.
Go get help. You need help. So we'd already been in counseling for I don't know, maybe 2 years leading up to when we got pregnant and when our son was born. And then after he passed away, probably, I'm trying to think when we started going back to counseling, because we took off a little bit of time, but it wasn't much time. We probably started going back to counseling probably 2 or 3 months after our son passed away. And we're still in counseling because this is something that we're going to need help with for the rest of our lives. This is not something that just happens and then it just goes away the next day. So yes, we did go through counseling. We are still in counseling because we are committed to making our marriage work, and marriage is hard. Marriage is a lot of work. It's tough. And when you throw in losing a child, when you throw in some other life stuff, especially when you throw those things in very, very early, it can cause your marriage to fall apart.
Yeah.
It can cause you to mentally check out. And so I think that counseling is very important. It's very important. But in addition to counseling, also being able to open up to those who are around you, who, you know, are willing to listen to you, who are willing to give you the type of support that you need and that you desire. So through our church, I'm a member of like the Praying Wives group. We have like small groups. So like I'm a member of like the Praying Wives small group. We're members of a couples group. And then I have, you know, close girlfriends who I know I can talk to. And we have our families who are immensely supportive of us, who've been there for us every step of the way. So, you know, really us just being open to other people about what we've gone through has also helped us out a lot. Yeah. And not just wanting to like shut down and not mention it to anyone.
Yeah. Because it does feel easier to shut down, but it's not helpful at all to shut down.
Yeah. So, you know, I think that's another piece of advice for parents who walk through, you know, what we've gone through. If as much as you can, and I know it hurts, I know that it hurts, but as much as you can, you know, be willing to open up and to share your experience, because you might find out that someone else has gone through something similar. Maybe they were just waiting on a person like you to come along and to share your story also.
Yeah. All right. Well, Danielle, I feel like I can talk to you all day because we just have so much in common. And I, you know, whenever I meet someone like you who understands, you know, the conversation is very long. Yeah, it's like, hey, you understand me?
I get it, girl. I get it.
Yeah, but I really have to thank you so much for coming on the show, sharing this incredible story. I am so proud of you, proud of all the things that you've done. And I can only hope for someone who may be listening to this, if you're having a hard time, I want you to know that, you know, there is no set time on grieving. There's no certain way for you to grieve. And grieving looks different for all of us. You know, like I'm saying to you, Danielle, like, I mean, your son would have been 18 months now. 18 months into my grief, I couldn't even think to create an organization. You know what I mean? Like I had ideas, but I wasn't in a place where I was strong enough to do it. You know what I mean? So maybe someone is out there and they feel like they're 3 months into their grief and they feel like they should be somewhere else. And I want people to understand, like, no, give yourself time. Everyone's time. There is no timeline, you know.
There is no timeline. No timeline. Everyone grieves differently. Everyone's grieving process looks different.
Yeah.
And you have to do what's best for you.
Yeah.
And you cannot compare your journey to anyone else's, because everyone's gone through different things. And even the things that you may know about regarding someone else, you still don't know the entire story. There's always more that's going on behind the scenes. So never compare to anyone else's.
Yeah. Because I remember a lot of people being like, oh, you're so strong. And I'm like, girl, if you only knew what it took for me to get out of bed.
And what's the alternative? You know, we hear that so often. Oh, you're so strong. Well, what's my alternative? You know, like, you don't know how strong you are until being strong is your only option.
Literally.
So, you know, it's one of those things that life hits and you just learn how to navigate it. You never thought you'd be in the situation. You never thought that you'd be here. You don't want to be here, but since you are here, you make the best out of it. But yeah, nobody's you know, grieving process is the same, and it's okay. It's all right. So,
and that's part of another purpose of this show too, is I do want to show the spectrum of what grieving looks like, because it's different for everyone, and I don't want anyone to think that it looks a certain way or it takes a certain amount of time. But again, thank you so much. I'm so appreciative of you taking time out of your day. I know you have a lot going on. You know, just taking the time to talk to me today and share all this insight. And I know there's someone out there who, I mean, you've inspired me, you know. So I know there's someone out there who you're touching their heart right now and you're totally speaking to their soul. Be sure to include all of your information on the show notes. That way people can contact you if they'd like to. Is there anything else you'd like to share before we go today?
No, I just want to say thank you so much for hosting the show and for your organization and for your ministry, really from your heart, and wanting to connect with families like ours. And, I just, wish you all of the best. I'm so honored to have been a guest on your show. And for all of those parents, don't ever let anyone take away the fact that you were still a mom, you were still a dad. Your child not being here on earth does not mean that they don't exist. And just continue to love on each other. As Ellen always says, be kind. And thanks again so much, Janelle. I really appreciate you and everything that you're doing.
And I appreciate you. Thank you so much. And you just struck another chord right there without even knowing it. Don't let people take away, the fact that you are a parent, and don't allow people to minimize your grief either, because sometimes that happens again because they don't know how to deal with it. They kind of try to minimize it, so you don't really talk about it or, bring it around them. But yeah, man, this is our journey, and we're all just learning every day how to deal with it. And losing a child, it's ongoing grieving. It doesn't end. You just learn every day how to better deal with it and how to work through it. And I think a great way of doing that is by sharing our stories. So if you're listening and you would like to share your story on an upcoming episode, be sure to shoot me an email at info@janelle.com. And my name is spelled JHEANELL. And that's what this is all about, you guys, putting faces to loss, sharing our stories, not being ashamed, speaking our children's name. That's so important. Your child is still your child. They exist. Speak their name. Don't hide it. This is just our lives. This is our new normal. So Danielle, thank you so much again. Like I can't stop thanking you. It's one thing to, hear your story over and over in your head, or to write it down, but to speak it out loud and be that vulnerable is not easy. So I really have to thank you so much for doing that.
Thank you. It was awesome talking with you.
Okay, well, thank you so much to everyone who's watching or listening. Thank you so much for being here. And that is it for episode 2 of Babyloss Talk.